Let's finish up this lesson by looking at how to solve equations with rational exponents. Let's begin by looking at these simple equations. X to the 1/2 would be the same as the square root of x is equal to 12. Well, we just learned that we need to do the inverse, which would be square both sides. Okay, so let's consider it by leaving it in the x to the 1/2 equals 12 power. So we just said we would square, so we're going to square both sides right here, which power to a power would be x to the 1/2 times 2 would be x to the first, or just x, is equal to 144. So what did we do? Well, we raised it to the second. So what are we going to do here? This is the same as the fourth root, so we're going to raise it to the 4th power. This produces x equals 3 to the 4th power would be 81. So how does this now apply if I have x to the 2/5 power? Well, if you kind of look at, well, what did we do here? We raised this one to the second, this one to the 4th. How are they related? Well, 2 is the reciprocal of 1/2. 4 is the reciprocal of 1/4. So if I raise x to the 2/5 to the 5/2 power, I'm going to be in really good shape, because x to the 2/5 to the 5/2 would be keep your base and multiply your exponents, which would be 10 over 10, or x to the first. And then I have 4 to the 5/2. But I think to help you understand this, I'm just going to remind you that 4 to the 5/2 is the same as the square root of 4 to the 5th power. Well, I can clean that up a bit. I can take the square root of 4 to the 5th, I can at least clean it up. Think what's going to come on the outside of that radical? Well, 2 goes into 5 2 times, so that means a 4 to the 2nd is going to come out, and what's left over, well, there'd be a remainder of 1, so I would still have 1 4 inside the radical. So this would be 16 times the square root of 4, okay? If you want to leave it in rational exponent form, it could be 16 times 4 to the 1/2 power. I just think that the first way, though, would be just a little bit easier to understand. And I can do one more thing, because I know the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2. So that gives me x equals 16 times 2, which is 32. Now, if I were you, what I would always just kind of get in the habit of doing is right at the beginning when you had 4 to the 5/2, since that's numeric, type it in your calculator and see what you get. If you don't get a decimal, yay, you're in good shape. It's going to be one that turns out to a nice rational value, and you will get 32. Okay, so in general, what are we doing? We're going to isolate our power. We're going to raise both sides to the reciprocal power. And why does it work? Well, it works because of our exponent rules. If I have x to the 2/3, raise that to the 3/2 is the same as 6 over 6, or x to the first. And that helps us isolate x. We just need to remember whatever we do to one side, we've got to do to the other. So let's illustrate that with some practice. So I'm going to begin by dividing both sides by 4. Gives me x to the 3/2 is equal to 27. And now what am I going to do? I'm going to raise that to the reciprocal power, meaning I'm going to raise it to the 2/3 power. And I'm going to raise 27 to the 2/3 power. So this would give me x to the first is equal to 9. You can type that in your calculator, but hopefully you know that 27 to the 2/3, that's the same as the cube root of 27, which would be 3. Square it, you get 9. Okay, let's take a look at number 8 here. I'm going to begin by isolating my x plus 2 to the 3/4. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides, which gives me x plus 2 to the 3/4 is equal to 8. Now I'm going to raise both sides to the reciprocal power, which would be to the 4/3, and to the 4/3 on this side. 3/4 times 4/3 is 1, leaving me with just x plus 2. 8 to the 4/3 you can type into your calculator, or if you're good at mental math, recognize that's the same as the cube root of 8, and that, which is 2, raise that to the 4th power, and I get 16. Lastly, subtract 2 from both sides, and I get x equals 14. It's always a good idea to check for any extraneous solutions. It only takes a second to to make sure when you type in 14, plug in 14, you get 14 plus 2 is 16. 16 to the 3/4 power is 8 on the calculator. 8 minus 1 is 7, so we're in good shape.